Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode number 11 of the Lawn Care CEO podcast. My name is Dan Ralphs. I'm the head coach here at the Lawn Care CEO. I'm here with the CEO of the Lawn Care CEO, Aaron Suttonfield. Aaron, welcome to the day, my friend. Welcome to the day.
It's good to be back.
I don't know why I'm feeling pumped, but I'm feeling pumped today. I guess I'm just excited about our topic, to be honest, a little bit. We had this moment today as we were chatting, we were preparing for this, where Aaron and I realized that we had gone into the weeds before really describing the forest. We before saying even what a forest was, we into the weeds. Last week we were talking about, I guess it wasn't last week, 2 weeks ago, we were talking about the importance of creating a culture of account, and we used kind of the example of a lovable loser in our company who was great culture wise, but just wasn't quite hitting the mark when it came to production. And so we kind of said, hey, how do we create an environment where that happens? And we reference things like KPI scorecard. We reference things like an objective, clear understanding what that person's role was, what their responsibility was, like all of these the pieces to the puzzle, but we didn't show you the picture of the puzzle. And so today the goal is to show you a little bit of the picture of the puzzle so that you can start to understand exactly how we do this. So just to be totally, I had a buddy who used to call it open kimono. Open, which for whatever reason is not an attractive image in my mind when I think about a man wearing a kimono and being very open about his kimono. But just to be totally open kimono about this whole thing, we're coaches. That's how we make our money. When we don't make money on podcasts. But what we do is we coach companies through the process of learning how to be great CEOs. In fact, we sometimes call ourselves fractional CEOs. And Aaron, for the listeners at home who don't know what a fractional CEO is, what's a fractional CEO?
Well, we sit side by side with CEOs for a small period of time. And so we aren't full-time CEOs for them. We're part-time CEOs and not even part-time. We're kind of fractional, right? Like just a little small sliver of time spent with the CEO to help guide them through the strategies that CEOs have to deal with, right? And so many times, think about entrepreneurship, think about lawyers, think about maybe you've got a doctor that's a family practice that's not part of some big conglomerate, or a small law firm, or maybe a good plumber. A lot of times, all of those people are really good at their craft. We might call them they're really good technicians.
Yep.
But they're not great business owners. Matter of fact, Dan, I had a real good friend of mine in today doing some HVAC work for me. And we were talking about his journey in the industry, and he's been really successful, and he's started his own little deal. And I was sharing with him about that exact thing. He's like, hey, you can be an excellent HVAC technician and owner, but you need to be aspiring to be a great business owner if you want to scale and attract talented people.
And at the center of this podcast, that's exactly what we're trying to do. Is we may be, I'm not good at taking care of lawns, but what I am good at is I'm good at, I think, or at least I aspire to be good at, being a great CEO, or at least understanding the craft of CEOing. And so we're trying to help you learn how to think and speak the language of CEO. Years ago, I used to be a language coach and teacher. And as a language coach, I taught Spanish at this language school. And it's when you learn a language, it's just repetition. You have to repeatedly repeat. And then there comes a moment where, for those of you who've learned a second language, where it clicks. And the moment it clicks is when you stop translating from one language to another and you just think in the new language. So before, it would be like I would see my cell phone and I would say, cell phone, telefono, cell phone. And then there comes a moment where you just look at your phone and you think telefono. And it just translates. And so really the goal of this podcast, the goal of Lawn Care CEOs, is to help people to speak fluent CEO, to think like CEOs, for them not have to consider, but almost instinctually respond as a CEO would respond. And so over the last 10 years, probably more, 12 years, I've been hanging out with, coaching, working with, and exclusively thinking about how do we help CEOs think like CEOs. Aaron, you just learned it because you've been CEOing so long now. You could be that other company's grandfather, right? Like you've been doing it for
Yeah, I mean, I tell people all the time, I don't, I can coach you because I know what not to do more than I know what to do sometimes.
yep.
But I mean, yeah, I mean, this is my 28th year of owning and operating a lawn care company. So yeah,
And so
unfortunately, I paid the stupid tax.
and so yeah, been there, paid the
So
stupid tax.
Dan, real quick on your point about the language, Tim
Yeah, of
Ferriss, you've heard of Tim Ferriss, right?
course. Yeah,
He's the
4
guy
hour
that
work
wrote
week
the
guy. Yeah.
4 Hour Work Week and 4 Hour Body. He talks about, to your point about learning a language. I think when you're learning this language of CEO, to learn the Spanish language, if I learned 5%, I think is what he talks about. If you could learn 5% of the language, you could speak the Spanish language fluently. And the effort it takes to learn 5%, it's not that great. But the effort to learn
Mm,
the other 95% is like astronomical. It's like it's unfathomable. And we get caught up thinking we need to learn 100% of a language when the reality is if
yeah.
we could learn 5 to 10% of a language, we could actually speak it fluently. So as you're thinking about becoming a better CEO, we don't need you to learn 100% of this language. We need to learn portions of it. And so our attempt today with this short podcast is to kind of share the outline of what that structure looks like. And so we won't dig deep into all these things. But Dan, I was asking Dan when I asked him about this. I said, I think you've given this talk at least 100 times.
Only like 98. So,
Okay.
but the spirit of it is, today I want to teach you, I give a workshop when we're coaching companies called How to Think Like a CEO. And so today I want to give you my framework, my lens that we leverage when I wake up in the morning and when I want to be in my CEO brain. I have a very specific like model that I use to think through each aspect that I need to have my brain focused on when I'm CEOing. Now, obviously, many of you wear hats other than CEO. You wear operations manager hat, you wear marketing director hat, you wear sales director hat, you wear janitor hat, or you're taking out the garbage. Like you wear all these different hats. And so for me, the hat I want you to put on right now is just CEO hat. That if all you were doing was CEOing, where would my brain need to be, and how would I think effectively and operate effectively like a CEO? And so that's what we're going to spend time on today. Is we're going to spend time on sharing with you this outline of what it means to think like a CEO. So I want to start this conversation by sharing the story of what it looks like when it's really, really well done, when it works. Um, it was over 10 years ago, coming up closer to 15 years ago, when I was I had my first corporate job. So I got hired to be the customer service rep, I think was my job, because I'd retired as a school teacher and I was going to be a customer service rep. And I got hired on for my first corporate job. I later find out it was corporate. Um, I remember the interview I had when I sat down. The guy was literally sitting there eating cereal with his feet up as he did my interview, which I came to find out was all strategic part of him communicating this culture that we had, which was again not very corporate. They walked me out onto the big football field they had, and they showed me their signs up above that had their purpose, their mission, their vision, their values, and they had me read through those things. And literally they go, "Are you passed?" And I was like, "What do you mean I passed?" They said, "Well, your eyes lit up when you read our purpose statement." And so all of these things, right, were ways of them vetting and creating this culture. But the moment where the culture really stood out of what they'd created and what the CEO, Mask, who's probably one of the great CEOs that I've ever encountered, the CEO, this young CEO, had created a culture that was really magical. And I'll describe it this way. That year, we had a goal of hitting a revenue target of $26 million in revenue. In fact, we had these big T-shirts with the word "believe" across it. We had, you know, 26 on the back, and there were people like, I was brand new to all this, and they had people on literally standing on chairs, like, "Oh, we believe," and it was like cheering, and it wasn't like Wolf of Wall Street stuff, but it was like we were like pumped, we were excited about it. And and in fact, our CEO had said he'd double the Christmas bonus if we hit 26 million, which meant like an extra $150 for me, which didn't mean a lot, right? But like it was more that everyone was caught up in this cause. Everyone was bought in. Everyone from every side of me, all around me, they had drunk the Kool-Aid of Infusionsoft and they were pumped about it. Well, it was December 3rd we had an all hands company meeting, which was the beginning of every month. And Clayton stood up, our CEO, and said, listen, and Clayton is a super optimistic guy. But in this instant, he was feeling defeated. And I said, Clayton, what's up? No. And he said, that was later. Clayton said, you know what, guys, I hate to break it to you, but we're not going to hit 26 million. Literally one of our core values was we do what we say we'll do. and Clayton said, we're not going to do what we said we do. And he said, the reason I'm telling you is I don't want you to go spending money that you don't have because you expecting this Christmas bonus money. And I just got to let you know, no matter what we do, we're not going to hit it. Even if we had hit all of our goals for December and more, there's no real path to it that I can see. Well, it was kind of a deflating meeting. And we all walked up to, I should say, I followed a couple of the kind of core members of the team up to Clayton. I was brand new. And they just kind of said, this feels gross, man. I don't like this at all. Like, how much are we short? And he explained, he's like, well, we're probably 400,000 short, something like that. Even if we hit all our goals, even if we exceed our goals, we'd be way behind. And someone in the group just goes, can we try? And he's like, sure, but you have to realize that we not only have to bill for the work, but we also have to fulfill all the work in order for it to be accounted for 2020, 2011, I think it was. And he goes, and they're like, okay, we will produce and bill $400,000 worth of work between now, December 3rd and December 31st. Can we try to do that? And so they gathered in a little room. They sent out an email to everyone that said, hey, listen, you guys, we're going to try to hit this thing. I get about 150 employees. If you want to help, meet us tomorrow under the Christmas tree. And it was like, okay. And literally we probably had 100 people gathered around that little Christmas tree out of the 150. And they all were like, we want to do it. Now I want you to imagine, Aaron, for a moment, if you can, that you came to your team and you said, hey team, I think we're going to be a little behind our goal this year. Like, no, CEO, we refuse to let you tell us we're not going to hit our revenue goal. In fact, we're going to sacrifice our time. We're going to cancel Christmas trips. We're going to do whatever it takes to hit the goal. And long story short, by the way, we hit the goal $26,005,000. And we all left feeling like, yes. So again, this is like, the reason I share that story is like, this is the culture. I'm going to share with you the framework that crafted that culture. We were on the Inc. 500, 5,000 list. We were on the Great Places to Work, top 20 great places to work in the country. Like, it was an awesome, awesome place to work. And this framework that I'm going to share with you was born out of that culture. And it's going to sound like other frameworks you may have heard of. It may sound like EOS, like people know about EOS, which is a great framework. I think it's awesome. I'm a fan. But I never heard of it. We built this framework way before that. And it's a framework that was built and organized and operated that crafted this really great culture. And then we had all these small businesses, because we served small businesses at the time, that came to us and said, hey, hey, Infusionsoft, how do we learn to do this? And this is what was born out of it. It's called the Elite Business Growth Model, until we think of a better name. And
just rolls off the tongue, doesn't it?
But for lack of a better word, if you're talking about, you can talk about the elite model. And the elite business model is an awesome model. And I just want to share it with you, because the way that it helps me to think is it helps me to think like a CEO and how to organize and operate like a CEO. All right. That's the introduction. Ready, set, here we go. Imagine, if you will, in your mind that there are three kind of categories of things we're going to be thinking about, three big boxes, three big buckets that we're going to put all this into. One is we mentioned in our podcast last week that there are three jobs of any CEO: set the vision, build the team, don't run out of money. Set the vision, build the team, don't run out of money. And the number one job is to set the vision. And that makes sense, because if I said, hey, follow me, your first question would be, where are we going?
Where are we going?
Where are we going? And so in order for me to be a great CEO, I have to be able to answer the question, hey, this is where we're going. And Jim Collins, the eminent author of books like Good to Great and Great by Choice and E-Myth, not E-Myth, and Beyond Entrepreneurship, which is a really great under-known book from him, wrote about 3 different types of elements to crafting a vision. And he called it the purpose, the values, and the mission were the 3 parts that crafted the overall vision of the company. The purpose answers the question, why do we do what we do? The purpose answers the question, why do we do what we do? What gives our work meaning? And I know this is going to sound a little froofy, especially if you've revenues, payrolls due, and life is busy. But I'm telling you, in order for us to cast a vision and to lead effectively as a CEO, I have to have a good answer to the question, why does this work matter? Or why should it matter to someone other than me? Why should it matter to the people who are working and slogging and suffering for me? And by the way, because nobody's inspired by how do I make my boss more money? And by the way, making more money has a very limited motivational capacity. I know some of you might be very motivated by money, but after you make a certain amount, you get to a certain number, that motivation kind of goes away. And so even as a CEO, even as an owner, I need a bigger reason to really believe and to care and to make sacrifices for and to grow a company. And so, Aaron, maybe you can share a little bit about when I met you for the first time and I started things, you already had a really strong purpose and you're a very purpose driven person in general. Talk for just 2 minutes about your experience with purpose and how it aids you as a CEO.
Yeah. I've shared this a couple times, I think, in this very podcast, but this is my 28th year and probably year 20, early 20s. In my company, I reached a point where I wasn't worried about money as much. And about the same time, I met a pretty cool guy, Ryan Chipman and Brandon Brown, who were both in the industry at the time, and they were helping companies kind of like we do. And I but I reached a point where I wasn't grinding anymore to make money. Bills were getting paid regularly, and weren't worried about we had a good nice little nest egg saved up, and got the company debt free. And I just remember being kind of like, oh, like, what do I do now? And I was comfortable, and so I really realized at that point, my purpose had been all around money. And so at that same time, I meet these guys who are actually they're EOS implementers at the time. And so I had this whole day long, did 2 days with them actually. And we started talking about this word purpose and values and some mission. And I spent an entire day crafting this purpose, which my purpose is at RDS Lawn Care. We're a residential lawn fertilization and weed control company. And at that time we were that and some mowing and a little bit of cleanup work. But our purpose became very clear after that day that I am really happy when 2 things are going on in my industry. One is taking the worst yard in the neighborhood and making it the best. Like I love saving someone's lawn. I love when we get someone and they're like, I've done everything. You're not gonna have nice grass at this house. I've given up. What can you do? And we just flip that yard around in 12 to 18 months and it's the best. That never gets old. 30 years from now, if RDS is still doing that, I'll be excited by that. That'll never get old to me. The other one is I genuinely like impacting people. And I love when I help someone and someone calls and says, hey, how do I fix my business? How do I hire? How do I implement P4P or whatever? Like we were just naturally in a culture, in a group of people that were naturally doing that for each other. And I love that. And Dan, you and I both serve in our churches, and I just grew up in a family that did that. And I like that. I want to be helpful. If I'm not helpful, I don't want to be around that place much, you know? And so we crafted a purpose that day, and it's been my purpose since
Save
2016. And it's,
lawns
yep,
and impact
yep.
people. And so when Aaron wakes up in the morning, his feet hit the floor and his RDS hat is on. He says, listen, today I need to save lawns and impact people. And for all of us, that's what we want to do. We want to get to a point where you wake up in the morning and that's what the fire that drives you. Inspiring men are inspiring because they are inspired. They're caught up in a higher purpose. They're they're incorruptible because they care more about this purpose than they do about some of their own things. And I know that's, again, we're talking very kind of high level things for somebody who's mowing grass, but at the end of the day, this is meaningful and it matters. And that becomes the where are we going? Well, we're going to save lawns. We're going to impact people. It becomes the why we do what we do. So principle number one is purpose. So again, this is in the bucket of vision, purpose. The second piece is core values. So if I say, hey, follow me, we're going to Detroit. The first question you're gonna have is, why are we going to Detroit? Like all the places. Actually, Detroit's a great city. But I'd have to explain. I'd have to inspire you. I'd have to explain why are we doing it. The next important question, honestly, if I'm crafting a vision of this great road trip, we're going to go somewhere, is who's coming with us? And for those of you who like road trips, the who is almost as important as the and so in order for us to do a great road trip, we have to have a great answer to who is coming with us. And this is where we craft the vision, not only of why we're doing what we're doing, but the culture, the environment, the people that we're going to surround ourselves with. We want to get clear about who is going to be in the building as we're building this. And it really is both a question of who is going to be there and how we're going to behave as a group in order for us to move forward. And, when we sat down together, Aaron and I, one of the reasons we feel like we are great partners is because we so align when it comes to the core values, the way that we see the world, the way that we approach the world are very similar. So we have core values, things like we listen, we care, we serve, we do the right thing, we prioritize people over profits. And that becomes like the kind of people we want to attract and gather to the lawn care CEOs are people who share those core values. Because if they do, they're going to be kind of like us. They're going to fit in here and we're going to have a great time because every day I show up to work, generally people are going to be on the same page and I'm going to be battling a bunch of things that are core to me. I'm not going to be battling on the core things. So if somebody said, no, we want to prioritize profits over people, I would say, no, that's not us. That's not us. This is not who we are. And my wife would probably appreciate it if I prioritize profits over people sometimes, but that's just not in my DNA. My DNA
And Dan,
is,
they wouldn't say we prioritize people over profits. Here's what they would do is you would see
yeah,
that they were focused more on the sale, or if they were just all about, oh, let's just sell and not solve problems, there'd be some friction for us,
yeah,
right? And a lot of times when you're talking about this, Dan, this values part, and I think about this, I think about like, I met my wife when I was young. We started dating when I was 19. But before her, yeah, I had a few girlfriends here and there. And it's kind of like, it's hard to live with someone, right? And I don't know how to teach people how to be married for 24 years. I'm going on 24 this year. But I know that if your values aren't aligned, it's hard, right? And I think you've got a very successful marriage as well. And so like to me, I think what happens in business when people get at odds, and by the way, marriages and business breakups are some of the most vicious fights in the world, right? And
yes,
and I think it's because it becomes so personal, and it is personal, right? But at the end of the day, when values don't align, it's hard to work with someone. It
yeah,
becomes just painful. And so if you don't have this nailed down and maybe you're riding and you're listening to this today and you're like, oh, yeah, I got some on my team I don't like, your values probably aren't aligned. And let me say this real quick. Neither one of you are bad people.
yeah,
It's not a good versus evil thing when we talk about
nope,
values. And a lot of times in a marriage breakup or a business breakup, it's like, oh, they were evil. No, they weren't. They just saw it differently than you. And you guys can't work together, but you're not evil people, right? And
yeah.
it just I think so many times we like turn it into this, Dr. Evil putting laser beams on sharks' heads type thing. And I just don't think there's a lot of Dr. Evils in the world. There's some evil people,
Yeah.
but I don't think businesses who break up somebody's evil, right? And so values help us get that right, is my point.
Yeah.
And
Values help to define that. And I loved how you said, that was such a beautiful way to say it. It's just hard to live with someone who you don't share the same values with. And that's true. And by the way, when you're employed, you're living with somebody who has a different set of values than you. That can be a very frustrating, very difficult place to be. And it's not good or bad, not right or wrong. Like there's some values I wish I had. Like I wouldn't work in a company that was like had a core value where it was like we are fun, that we're like really good at partying and like had a great time. And like I wouldn't I like I wish I were that guy. I want to be that guy, but I'm not that guy. And so I wouldn't fit into that culture where they were like, yeah, let's go party and let's goof off and let's like I wouldn't be that guy. And that's okay. They company and even a very successful one with that being their culture. Like Zappos was that way. Zappos had a culture that was
Mhm.
like really emphasized fun and quirkiness and weirdness. And I appreciate that culture and I want to be like that culture. But if I would have showed up there, I would have been kind of bugged the whole time. And so, but
It's a great example.
the second part of vision is for us to craft a clear understanding of who we want to bring with us on this journey. And that starts by us articulating clearly what our core values are. So I wake up in the morning and I say, all right, my purpose is to save lawns, impact people. My core values, this is who I need to be today. When I wake up, I got to like operate in integrity with the values that I espouse to be a great example of the things that I claim to want in this business. The third piece is not only where we're going, who's coming with us, why we're going there, who's coming with us, but a very clear articulation of where we're going. And this is where we talk about mission. Now, oftentimes companies will have mission statements, and what that really means is much closer to what I just described as a purpose statement, where we're talking about some high-minded idealism, which is important to have those kinds of statements. But when I'm talking about mission statements, it's much closer to what would be described in a military operation. If you were in a military operation, you said, all right, it's like Mission Impossible. Here's your mission, choose to accept it. And it's a very clear articulation of an objective. It's what we're trying to accomplish right now. And we usually recommend that companies organize their objective around 3 to 5 year periods where you say, all right, the mission for the next 3 years is this. It wants to be something that's measurable, that's check offable, that we're able to get to, and it even has clearly defined mission goals or evidences of accomplishing that mission. So when I went to Infusionsoft, the mission of Infusionsoft is to create and dominate the market of all-in-one sales and marketing software for small business with 100,000 customers worldwide by December, whatever, I can't remember the date. I still have it memorized. That's how important it was to me and how clear it was, clearly articulated it was. And a big part of our culture was that we had this very clearly defined mission statement of what we were trying to accomplish in the next 30 things. So again, part one is vision. Vision includes a purpose, clear articulation of why we do what we do, values, which is an understanding of who are we going to bring with us along the way, what do we want to stand for, how do we want to behave, and then the last piece is the mission statement. And the mission statement is a very militaristic objective that we're trying to accomplish. So just to give them an example, Aaron, what's your current mission at RDS?
Current mission at RDS is to build the team and learn to scale customer acquisition by December 31st, 2025.
So very clear.
And
This is
and
what
we
we're up
are
to over the next 3 years.
Yeah, and we're halfway through that mission, and we have the team built completely. I mean, if you remember when we crafted this mission in
Yep.
2022, I was running the company 100%, and I was not there a lot, but everything had to flow through me. And so I was out of dated operation, but it still flowed through me, right? It was kind of remote. And I'm 100% out of day-to-day operation. They tell me what happened. They don't ask me how to fix something that's going on, right? And so, and then the last part of that mission is what we're really focused on right now is we know how to get clients. We're trying to scale that, and we're trying to almost double our lead volume over what we've had for the last 5 or 6 years. And so we're
Yeah.
really, really focused internally on client acquisition.
And so that's his beautiful mission. He's very clear when he wakes up in the morning. He's like, okay, I got 2 jobs. We're going to figure out how to build this team, and we're going to figure out how to scale customer acquisition. And we're going to do all of that by a very specific due date. So it becomes more goal objective than it is aspirational direction. And he's clear. And again, those are the three probably most powerful words that come, and you've arrived at a good spot when it comes to your vision of the company, when you can say, I am clear. I'm clear. I know what I'm trying to
Good
build.
point.
I know where I'm trying to go. And I have a pretty good understanding of how we're going to get there. That is what it means to set the vision. So bucket number one, when I talked about these 3 buckets, bucket number one is set the vision, and it sits above all others. It informs all others. Everything else is done in context of that overall of that overall vision. Again, when I talk about vision, purpose, values, mission. All right. So that's bucket number one. Wake up in the morning, purpose, values, mission. Bucket number 2 is what we call working. This comes from Michael Gerber in his book, The E-Myth. He talked about the difference between working in your business and working on your business. And so the next 2 buckets are working in the business, day to day, on the business, strategic growth. So operational, day to day versus bucket 2. And then bucket 3 is going to be strategic growth. So let's talk about bucket 2, which is, how do I work in the business effectively? And how do we deliver consistently the work that needs to be delivered on a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month basis? And that begins with a clear understanding of the work that needs to be produced. So bullet 1 in that bucket is our KPIs, or key performance indicators. In other words, how do what's measurable? What can we see, touch, taste that's going to show us that we've successfully delivered the work for the day? And how can we check the box and say, we did it? We delivered the work for the day, or the work for the week or the month. And until we clearly can articulate what those goals and what those KPIs are, it's hard for us. Sometimes we're just busy without, we can be busy without movement. I had somebody that gave this example earlier. He called someone at the front of the room and said, march in place. Lots of activity, not a lot of movement. And then he said, now take 10 steps forward. And you saw him make a lot of movement with that same activity. And so until we have clearly understand and clearly measurable KPIs, sometimes we have a lot of activity, but not a lot of movement, where we're not really sure if we're making progress or hitting the goals that we are looking for. And so one of our mantras will always be, know your numbers. And KPIs are the day-to-day numbers. So I wake up in the morning, if you can imagine, like a president reviewing the news of the day. I wake up in the morning, I'd roll out of bed. I would think about my purpose, values, mission. I would understand what the goal is. And then I would move on to the working in the business of the day. I would wake up and I would look at my KPI scorecard, which had the core metrics of the business for the previous week. And I would begin to work on areas where I saw that we're not producing the work that we need to, at the rate we need to, or with the efficiency we need to, or in the quantity that we need to. And so KPI scorecard. Well, once I understand the KPI scorecard, then I can start to say, all right, now I need to organize that KPI scorecard by giving pieces of the work to different positions. We call that an organizational chart, or an org chart. And I would say, okay, in order for me to produce, like Aaron, in your business, in order for me to produce $1.5 million in fertilization and lawn care, I'm going to be able to break that down and understand I need probably 4 or 5 technicians, and each technician needs to be producing this amount of work per day. And I'm going to understand I need this many technicians to fill that spot. I also need an general manager who's going to manage those technicians. I need someone in the office, and we begin to organize the work. So we're clear about the organization of the work. So again, I'm looking at my KPIs. My KPIs aren't quite right. The next thing I'm doing is like, all right, have we organized the work in a way that works for everyone involved? So part 1 is KPIs. Part 2 is org chart. Part 3, the third piece of the puzzle, is then I'm going to make sure each individual clearly understands their responsibility. We call that a big 3. so that each individual knows what they're expected to do and how it will be measured. So I know what the company needs to do, then I organize it by individual, and then I make sure I'm explaining clearly what each individual needs to do. This is probably, honestly, one of the biggest downfalls of leaders that I bump into is I ask them, is everyone in your organization clear about what's expected, how it will be measured, so they can know whether or not they're winning or losing? And almost universally, they're like, I mean, sort of.
Big
They get,
title. Yeah.
they
Title
kind of go
driven
like,
mainly.
yeah, they may have the title down, but if I say, what is your, like, how does your office manager know if she's winning or losing? And they kind of go, ugh, I don't know that she really does. And one of the hardest things in a job is to not know whether or not you're winning or losing. So you start off the day and you don't even really know what your job is every day. That's like a wearing feeling for an individual in an organization. So again, for me, I start clear KPIs, understanding what we need to produce on daily, weekly, monthly. Next, I organize that into positions, and then I make sure I'm communicating very clearly. Let me give you a good example. So if I were on Aaron's team and I was saying, all right, Aaron, we're going to design a big three, like the three primary responsibilities for your you don't call them service techs, you call them route
Route
managers.
manager. Yeah.
So for your route manager, what are the big three for your route manager? Thing
Yeah. So
one.
route
Yeah.
manager would be in their number one priority should be to produce, right? So they have a goal of
Produce,
production, 6,000.
hit production target,
Yep, $6,000 a
$6,000
week.
or more per week. Pretty
As a matter of
clear.
fact, we've go
Yep.
back and listen to P for P podcast, but if they
Yep.
are under that number, they get 13%. If they're over, they get 14%. So they're incentivized and they're paid based on production. So producing is the number one thing for them. They need to they're a route manager, so we were very important about this term. So you could probably say lawn technician or fertilization technician might be what the industry calls them, but we want to use the term route manager because we want them to manage the relationship of their clients. And so what determines is their client is if it's on their list that day, that I want them to take ownership of that relationship that day, right? And so we generally do have them going to the same people each round, and they start to develop some rapport. But ultimately, managing that relationship means I either get the job done, or Dan, in our world, I mean, they could go to a house and the gate's locked and they can't treat the backyard, or someone I got a call the other day. I'm filling in for our general manager this week. He's on vacation, and I got a call and they said, hey, they're building a deck in the backyard and it's a mess. What should I do? And so their job is to communicate with that homeowner. If they don't treat the lawn,
big three number one,
produce
$6,000 of work per week. Big three number two, or probably hit weekly production goals, and
yep,
they have
hit
a way
weekly
of knowing what that
production.
is.
Manage the relationship with their clients.
Manage
right?
client
Communicate.
relationships. And how do we measure whether or not that happened? Well, number of complaints coming in from clients might be measured. Number of callbacks might be measured. But we kind of have a sense of knowing whether or not our retention rate might be measured. We have a sense of kind of knowing what parameters are, because really we're talking about and this often happens with big three, too much into big three, but it's like we have a quantitative measure, really, how many are we doing, 6,000, and a qualitative measure, which is like, do it 6,000, but really well, take care of the clients, make sure they're happy. And then maybe number three is equipment maintenance.
They're supposed to manage, they need to take care of their tools, right?
So when I come in, again, so back to this framework, KPI, org chart, hey, org chart, route manager, I'm going to be very clear about telling you the three major responsibilities for you: hit your weekly production goal, manage client communication, and number three is maintain equipment, and build a team or something. And so there are three things I need you to do. And so we want to be clear about that with every individual. And then the fourth element when it comes to the day-to-day operations is that if something's not working on the KPIs, either it's the person doesn't understand their role, they're the wrong person, I have to fix the org chart, or I have to fix the system in which they're operating. And so, for example, like I'm a San Francisco 49ers fan. And so I love like the knock on their quarterback, Brock Purdy, is that he's a system quarterback. Well, what does that mean? It means, well, his system is so good, he doesn't have to be a great player to be successful there. Well, if I'm thinking from my CEO lens, that's what I want. I want good players to look great in my system, and I want great players to look like all-stars, which I think is probably the case with Brock Purdy. I think he's a great player, maybe not a Hall of Fame player, but he'll be a Hall of Fame player if he stays in this system because of the quality of the work that they're doing. And so, again, I wake up in the morning, purpose, values, mission, and then I go, all right, KPIs, are we producing what we need to produce? If not, let me work on the org chart, make sure everyone's really clear on their part of the org chart. And then if for whatever reason it's still not producing, even if when I have good people in the right seats, the next piece for me is I got to figure out my systems so that they help those people who are working in their roles to produce consistently, weekly, monthly, etc. Okay. So that's my working in the business category. Working in the business is, hey, I'm understanding exactly what we need to do to produce the work effectively in the weekly, daily, monthly. And I'm managing it that way to say, all right, where are my KPIs off? My KPIs are off. Where are my people off? Meaning they don't understand the work, or it's not organized correctly, or somebody has too much on their plate. And I'm fixing that again for my CEO. And then finally, I'm making sure that my systems are supporting the people in an effective way. I'm being repetitive here because, again, we're learning language. I'm going to say it again and again and again. Hopefully you'll remember it. All right, bucket one, purpose, values, mission, our vision bucket in the business, bucket number two. And then bucket number three is our bucket that really is going to talk about working on the business, because not only do we need to produce weekly, monthly, daily, but we also have to make the business better consistently. So not only do we need to move forward, but we need to move up. And the working on the business is the upward force in our projection, in our movement across this bar graph. It pulls us up when we're working on the business. In other words, how are we making the business better? So not only do we need to maintain my car, I need to implement projects to make my car go faster if I'm a race car driver, right? Not only do I need to put gas in the car and change the tires, but I also need to add new cool combustion engine things. You can tell I don't know a lot about cars. The Nashville people, the NASCAR people are mad at me right now. But moral of the story, though, is that there are two kind of halves of it, right? And so the way that we get at making sure we're working on the most important things is that we have a meeting rhythm where every quarter we meet, every quarter, at least for one day, and then annually 2 days. We meet every quarter and we pause. We slow down, we look at the business, and we ask the question, out of all of the things we could work on, and Aaron, in your business, how many things could be fixed tomorrow? How many things need to be fixed? Like
a lot. Yeah.
Infinite number of things. There's always something, and there's probably a long list. If we sat down with your company, we could find 100 things we need to make better. The key is, if I'm a good CEO, is to be able to choose out of all of the hundreds of things, which of the things are the most important to work on first, which will have the biggest leverage in the business to be able to move us forward powerfully so that we can grow and improve, et cetera. So once a quarter for a day, once a year for 2 days, we pause and we ask the question, what do I need to be focused on right now? And sometimes that's, I might spend, and then we're going to, out of that, we're going to choose every year 3 to 5 annual priorities, meaning this year we're going to transform the business in these 3 to 5 ways. We're going to it's going to be unrecognizable from the beginning of the year to the end of the year in 3 areas. And common annual priorities are things like, we want to become more data driven. We want to become more numbers driven. We want to increase our profit. We want to decrease our cost of goods. We want to increase our lead volume. So it's big, chunky things that we're going to spend the entire year working on. Then next, each quarter, we're going to choose a project or 2 or 3 projects that are going to move the needle in the area of our annual priorities. So we have annual priorities in this third bucket. We have annual priorities, quarterly priorities, and then ideally break it all the way down to specific tasks that we're going to do today or tomorrow or this week or next week. We have a very clear plan of action on how we're going to move things forward. So imagine, if you will, in front of me as a CEO on my KPI scorecard, I have basically 3 tabs. Tab number 1 describes our purpose, values, and mission. That's always in front of me. Tab number 2, I look at is my KPI scorecard, and it gives me all the data, all the core data and numbers I need, and it shows me whether I'm on track or off track. And then tab number 3 is a list of my annual priorities and the specific quarterly projects that I'm going to be taking on for that quarter to help me move the needle, with an understanding if we're on track or off. All right, see if this all makes sense. At the end of the day, if I wake up in the morning and I look at my KPI scorecard and everything's on track, and then I look at my quarterly projects and those projects are on track, I go back to bed because the company is where it needs. However, most days we wake up in the morning and we look at those 2 scorecards and there's something a little bit out of whack, and it directs our focus on what we need to be spending our time on, because either our KPIs are a little out of whack and we need to be putting those back into alignment, or our quarterly projects are behind or need focus or need attention. And therefore we focus and spend our attention. And when I'm wearing the CEO hat, that's where those are the 3 areas I'm playing in: setting the vision, building the team that is needed to deliver daily, weekly, monthly, and then finally, making sure our quarterly projects and priorities are moving forward. Now, this is a lot to take in. I wish we had more time. I wish I had a cool visual to show you. But generally, this is the framework. When I sit down across from a coach, if you call this up tomorrow and you said, "Hey, I want to coach with you guys," you would, and by the way, you just go to our website if you're curious about that. There's a place you could actually schedule an appointment. We can spend some time. But if you sat down across from me, the first thing I'm going to ask is, what's the vision? Once I understand that, the next thing I'm going to ask is, where are we at on our KPIs? And you might say, "What KPI? I don't measure things." And we'd be like, "All right, we're going to start by measuring things, right?" And then I would say, "All right, now that I understand where we're at, where we're going, the question then becomes, what would be the most important projects we need to be focused on to help you get there?" It's not too crazy, right? That's simple. And that's where we would spend our time in our coaching, as we'd be organizing, figuring those things out. And so our purpose today really was to try to give you that kind of context, that kind of clarity of seeing the big picture of when I wake up in the morning and as a CEO, I put my CEO hat. These are the kinds of things we would do. And eventually, right, Aaron, you get to a point where your full-time job is just CEOing.
I had a conversation today with our CPA where I said, "I'm a shareholder. We need to change the way I'm compensated." If you have a corporation, you have to take a reasonable salary, right? And I told her, I said, I can really make the argument that I'm just a shareholder at RDS at this point. Like I'm replaceable.
Yep.
and I've replaced myself. So yeah, Dan, it kind of can become a little boring because like I'm not needed. And we find, Dan, I think it's a good point to talk about, right? At this point, it's like you need to think this all the way out. What do you do when your company gets to that point?
Yeah.
You and I met because I started like figuring out other ways to do some other things that I was passionate about, and this is kind of how this lawn care CEO came about. Maybe for some people it's like, hey, I'm gonna travel and I'm gonna live in another. We know a good friend of ours, Rob Treppendahl, a part-time coach for us, who moved thousands of miles away from his company, lives in Greenville, South Carolina. His company's in Baton Rouge, and he wanted to live in another part of the country raise his family in a certain place, and he's a shareholder in his company.
And I'm sure there's some of you that are like, it feels like a long, long ways away to where you could actually pull out of your company where you wouldn't need a cell phone on your vacation. But if that's a dream for you, we should chat, because at the end of the day, that's what we do, is we try to help business owners learn to think like CEOs. And when you
Yeah.
learn to think like a CEO, you begin to organize a business that is easy to
I,
manage and easy to lead, and but also very effective, very productive.
I'm a member of this new group on Facebook, Dan. It's like businesses for sale or entrepreneurs for, I don't know, it's something like some kind of like, people who talk about starting or selling businesses. It's kind of a cool group, and I really enjoy the conversations and the topics that they post and talk about. But it got me thinking as we're talking about all this. I was given the book called Built to Sell in 2012 that really
Yeah.
changed the way I
Yeah.
look at structuring a company. And the thing that I want to offer to the guy who's like out there right now listening to this talk and going, oh, man, this isn't me. I'm out here grinding. I've got too many projects sold, not enough help, and I can't even think about being a CEO. I just need to get work done. I got to pay the mortgage this month. I'm behind on some bills. Credit cards are out of whack. If you're in that mode, or you're just like, I got 100 clients and I need 500, and I just can't see getting it right. Like, the reality is this. Um, I want all entrepreneurs to have the opportunity to say, I don't have to sell my business. Like, I can create a business that I become a shareholder in, and I'm not forced to sell. I think a lot of businesses that sell are sold. And matter of fact, Dan, I got an offer. I get approached daily and weekly by private equity companies, and it's pretty normal in our industry now. And here's their pitch: are you tired of your business running you? Are you tired of, like, their whole pitch to me is, I'll take your headaches away from you. And it's funny because I don't believe that they can implement and help my business more than what we've implemented with my business, right?
Yeah.
And the cool thing is, my business is worth more to me and is not a pain in my butt, and it is producing for me, and it's just a really wonderful place to get. And so our passion, I think, Dan, is to get people to that point where they have that opportunity to say, hey, I want to sell, or I don't have to sell, but I have something that's valuable. And by the way, if you have a dream, and I think every entrepreneur deep down inside is like, oh, I'd love for somebody to come to me and say, how much? Let me write you a check today. And the reality is, you're not going to get approached. And even if you are getting emails from people, when they look into your business, if they don't see this structure that we implemented, if they don't see a management team in place, if they don't see, an org chart, if they don't see, reoccurring revenue model or a predictable sales model,
Yep.
you have nothing of value. You have
Or
assets
or or
that
you or
are
you have
depreciating.
or you have something of value that they're going to try to exploit, right? They're going to think these
Yes.
guys don't know what they're talking about. They don't know what they're doing. And
Yep.
so I love that, Aaron. I think we'll leave you there. Like, build a business that's so valuable that you can sell it, but so valuable that you'd never want to, is what you've said a lot of times. So I'll just quote my partner here. We love you guys. We hope this was as always, go do some good in the world, because we need a lot of great people out doing good in this crazy world of ours. We love you guys. Take care. Bye.